as I mentioned, 49 people lost their lives. So obviously something like this always generates the talk about guns, gun laws in this country, and what should be done. Does anything need to be done? And we decided we ought to call Shari, our lifestyle attorney, to talk about the issues of gun control and what is going on in our country. So what exactly are the laws that are being discussed this week about gun control, Shari?
Sure. Well, it's important when we talk about gun laws in particular that we remember the context. So back 250 years ago when our country was formed, of course, our founding fathers risked their lives challenging the British monarchy, which made sort of separating power and not allowing it to be concentrated very important to them, which is one of the reasons our states have so much authority in addition to the federal government. So when we talk about gun laws, we're talking about state and federal laws. On the state level, those laws mostly look like background checks, licensing, registration. Some states actually do have laws addressing assault weapons in particular. But if you're one of those people who believe that the accessibility to these weapons is a big factor, then it's important to you to know what your own state laws are, because that may put you more or less at risk. And it just so happens that here in Florida we have fairly relaxed laws when it comes to guns.
All right, so on the state level, you're saying they're fairly relaxed. What do we have on the federal level?
So when we look at the federal laws, that history sort of begins around 1934 in circumstances that weren't that different. They were not dealing with terrorism, they were dealing with gangsters and gangland violence during Prohibition, and so the National Firearms Act was passed in 1934 as a way to control machine guns and shotguns, you know, those cut-off rifles and those types of things that were being used, and it actually worked very effectively. In the interim, we have on the full screen a lot of other laws have been passed on the federal level, mostly regulating manufacturers and distribution, sometimes the content in guns. There's a certain minimum amount of metal that has to be in there, that type of thing. The most recent legislation that is very controversial now was in 1994 with the assault weapons ban, which was constitutionally challenged and survived, but then it expired in 2004, and that's when we saw this big uptick in mass murder. Starting in 2006, since that point, we've had over 40 mass murders.
So how does the Second Amendment then protect people, and what does it have to do with these laws? How does it affect these laws?
Sure. So again, when we're talking about the Second Amendment, we need to think about the context in which that was passed, and we have it on the full screen so folks can see. It was largely to give states the right to have their own militia and for people to bear arms. Actually, 44 states, including Florida, have their own version of a Second Amendment, and that is one of the reasons that a lot of members of Congress and lobbyists sort of object to having some kind of gun regulations on the assault weapons. That's going to be a balancing act, much like it was back in 1934. I mean, that's what our country is all about. The thing that's important, Roxanne, is that it's up to Congress to pass laws to protect us, and this is becoming a public health and safety issue. It's up to the judiciary system to then determine if those laws comport with the Constitution. That's not really Congress's job, and this is an issue. The question now is what's going to be the tipping point. I was with the mother of one of the Sandy Hook children that was murdered at Sandy Hook. And back then we thought that might be the tipping point. Now it's children. This time, you know, it's the gay and lesbian community. The question is, when is it going to be enough?
When is it enough? And no doubt this is putting it back front and center and on the front burner once again. Shari, thank you very much for sorting some of this out. John, over to you.
And this morning.